Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. In today's video, I'll be using Scrapbook.com's lovely Bunches stamp set. Here's a look at Scrapbook.com's lovely Bunches stamp set along with the coordinating dies. There are two beautiful floral images, a small image with 3 tiny hearts and a couple of circles, plus 3 sentiments. Thank you, thinking of you, love you bunches, hello sunshine, and best wishes. And there's a die that goes around all 3 images, plus all 5 sentiments. I'll be sharing 3 different card designs featuring one of the lovely floral images. If you've watched my channel before, you know I do not color images. So I'll be showing some other techniques on how to use beautiful stamped images like this. For card design number 1, I have a piece of Scrapbook.com's black mixed media cardstock in a mini MISTI. I'll be doing some heat embossing. So first I'll treat the paper with some anti-static powder from Pink and Main. Just lightly brush it over the cardstock. Instead of using embossing ink, I'm actually using some white pigment ink from Honeybee Stamps. I'll ink up this stamp a couple times to get a good solid impression. The embossing powder I'm using is by Wow. It's their opaque, bright white, super fine embossing powder. And since I first treated the cardstock using the anti-static powder, I didn't end up with all those stray white embossing pieces. I'll heat set the image using a heat tool by Wow. And I know it doesn't really look any different on camera, but by heat embossing the image, it has this lovely embossed detail. Once it's cooled down, I'll use the coordinating die and cut out the beautiful floral image. And I'll hold the die in place using some of Scrapbook.com's mint tape. For the background of my card, I'm using pattern paper from Craft Consortium. This is the Retro Summer Collection. If you love to do ink blending to create your own background, that's always an option. But I love that there's another option by using pattern paper where they've already created those lovely backgrounds. I will be adding a little more detail on the pattern paper background and also the embossed image. I'm using Scrapbook.com's brand new white Lustre brush marker. I'll squeeze out a little bit of the ink on an acrylic block. I did add a tiny bit of water, mixed it up, and lightly tapped my paintbrush over the pattern paper background. For the embossed image, I'm adding a little bit of color to the white ink. The ink color is Distress Oxide Picked Raspberry. I tapped just a tiny bit on the acrylic block, mixed it up with the white ink, then I did the same thing and gently tapped it over the image. When the white ink is still wet, it doesn't show up a lot, but as it dries, that whiteness really starts to show. So I'll set both of those aside to completely dry and start working on the sentiment. I'll be adding the sentiment, "You're fabulous," and this is from Scrapbook.com's Hey There Friend word die set. It includes the outline and also the individual words. I used the same pattern paper for the outline. It was the very top of this background panel. For the word fabulous, I cut it out of white pearlescent cardstock by Spellbinders. And the pink cardstock for the word "your" is from Scrapbook.com's Sprinkle Smooth cardstock paper pad. The word fabulous is all one piece, but the word "your" is individual letters along with the apostrophe. I'm using a pair of reverse tweezers to hold the small die cut pieces, and the glue I'm using is Scrapbook.com's Artiste glue. I have the ultra fine tip on my bottle. I like being able to get behind those small die cut areas. For the tiny apostrophe, I'll first add a little bit of Artiste glue, then I'll pick up that tiny die cut piece using Scrapbook.com's Craft Pro Pick tool. I'll first use the wax tip to pick it up, then I'll use the piercing tool to help press it in place. I cut out a second outline piece from some silver holographic paper, and this paper is from Scrapbook.com's holographic mirror paper pad. I'll layer the two pieces together, creating this beautiful sparkly drop shadow underneath the sentiment. And to make sure those pieces stay together, I used some double-sided adhesive tape and also a little bit of glue. To help keep my workspace mat nice and clean, I'm doing all of the gluing on one of Scrapbook.com's project grip mats. This was a full 12 by 12 size. I simply cut down a small piece. Now that the pattern paper background is mostly dry, I'll be layering it on some black cardstock. The pattern paper piece is 5 3/8 of an inch by 4 1/8 of an inch, and the black cardstock piece is A2 size. I'm using Scrapbook.com's Deluxe Adhesive Roller. This adhesive is super sticky. Since I tend to be a little impatient and don't let all of my pieces dry, when I flipped over the panel, I placed it on that small silicone mat. I just wanted to make sure not to get any of the white ink on my white workspace mat. I'm adding the floral image in the lower left-hand corner of the card, and I'll adhere it in place with Artiste glue. For a little extra detail, I cut out a narrow strip of black cardstock. This is about 1/4 of an inch wide. I put some double-sided adhesive tape on the back side, remove the release paper, and I'll adhere it at the top of the card about 1/8 inch down from the bottom. For a sentiment, I will be popping it up using some foam dimension. I'm using Scrapbook.com's 1/4 inch foam in the 1 millimeter thickness, so it doesn't add a lot of extra dimension. If you like to add more dimension to your card, Scrapbook.com also has their foam rolls available in 2 millimeter and also 3 millimeter thickness. The 1 millimeter is my favorite. I'll remove the release paper and adhere the sentiment on the right side of the image, and part of the sentiment will be sitting on that floral image. For embellishments, I'm using Scrapbook.com's Pops of Color. This is the gloss black color. I'll put 3 above the sentiment and 2 drops in the lower left-hand corner. I prefer my Pops of Color drops to be on the flatter side, so I am gently tapping the edge of my card on one of Scrapbook.com's stack and sort trays. For card design number 2, the pattern paper is from Paper Rose Studio. I'm using the Rainbow Twirl collection. I have the 12 by 12 collection, but it's also available in the 6 by 6 size. For the background of my card, I selected this lovely rainbow wood grain pattern paper, and I'm cutting it out using Pretty Pink Posh's Stitch Torn Rectangles die. I love this die set. It adds the beautiful stitch detail along with the fun torn edge. I'll put adhesive on the back, and I'll be layering this piece on some black cardstock. I'm using the Deluxe Adhesive Roller and also some Artiste glue along the stitched edge. I want to make sure it lays nice and flat. I'll also place a large acrylic block on top for some added weight while the glue dries. I've already stamped the floral image on some of the pattern paper. It has this lovely watercolor design, and I'll cut it out using the coordinating die. The 2 pattern papers I use for the background and also the floral image are very similar, and I don't want that floral image to be completely lost on the background. So I also cut out a vellum stitched rectangle die cut. For a little extra dimension and stability, I cut out a second image outline piece from some black cardstock. I'll glue the 2 pieces together. Next, I'll adhere the vellum rectangle. I'm adding some adhesive just in the very center since I know it will be covered up with the floral image. Before adding the floral image, I'll flip over the card panel, put some adhesive on the back. Around the center of the card, I'll be wrapping some metallic rose gold twine. It's very thin, so it won't add a lot of dimension, but with the metallic finish, it adds beautiful shine. To help hold the end of the twine piece in place, I'll put a small piece of double-sided adhesive tape. Then I'll wrap the twine around the card 5 times. And I'm not doing it straight across. I'm going for a very random look. Then I'll flip over the card and secure the twine using more clear double-sided adhesive tape. I'll remove the release paper, put more adhesive on the back of this panel using the deluxe adhesive roller. And I'll also add some artiste glue along the edge of the twine. I just want to make sure it doesn't come off later. Then I'll add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Before adhering the floral image, I'll lift up some of the vellum rectangle and add a little bit of artiste glue, just in the areas that I know will be covered up with the image. I will be popping up the image with some foam dimension using the same 1mm foam. Since the very center will be sitting on the layers of twine, I'm only adding foam at the very top and bottom of the image. On the back side in the center, I'll add a scrap piece of cardstock, and that'll help it stay at the same level. I'll remove the release paper, put artiste glue in the center, and adhere my floral image on the card. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut out Hello Sunshine, and this sentiment is part of the Lovely Bunches stamp set. I stamped the sentiment on more pattern paper from Paper Rose. I have some double-sided adhesive tape on the back of the sentiment, but I'll also add a little bit of artiste glue. Then I'll adhere the sentiment in the upper left-hand corner. So there is my finished card, and this time I made a total of 4. And all of the cards look different since I stamped the image on different areas of pattern paper. For card design number 3, I have some of Scrapbook.com's white mixed media cardstock. I also pulled out their black project grip mat since I'll be doing some ink smushing on the background. I'll be using 2 different ink colors. Both are Distress Oxides. I'll start with Picked Raspberry, and I'll also be using Seedless Preserves. I'll press some of the ink on the grip mat, spritz it with water. Now you can take the cardstock and press it directly onto the ink for ink smushing, but I'm using a small piece of packaging that was from either a stamp set or maybe a die set. I like to save some of those pieces for ink smushing. I folded up the packaging piece, and I'll press it into the ink and then onto my paper. And I'm adding ink just on the top and right side of the panel. Now it would probably be best to let that panel completely dry, but I didn't. Now I'll do the same thing using the Seedless Preserves color, adding just a little more ink on the top and right side of the panel. Now this time I did let this panel completely dry, and I also assisted the drying using a heat tool. I pulled out my Rose Quartz MISTI. This is the regular size MISTI. I'll be stamping the floral image 3 times on this panel, starting in the upper left-hand corner. Part of the image will be going off the edge of the paper. I simply tucked a scrap piece of white cardstock underneath. I'm using Honeybee Stamp's Intense Black ink, and I will ink up the image several times to get a nice solid impression. I'm also using a stamping tool from LDRS, and that helps get even pressure when stamping. Now I'll rotate the panel and I'll be stamping the image in the lower right-hand corner. I didn't clean off the stamp, so I was trying to be really careful when placing it on the panel. Once that image has been stamped, I'll do the final image in the upper right-hand corner. I know it looks like the upper left-hand corner, but it will be the upper right-hand corner when the card is finished. Again, I didn't clean off the stamp, so I'm trying to be very careful when placing it on the card. I don't want to accidentally get a double image. And since I am stamping this image on several layers of ink, I did ink up this stamp, I think at least 4 times to get the nice solid impression. You could also heat emboss with black embossing powder, and I think that would really help the image pop. For a little bit of shine, I'll be adding a splatter on the background. I'm using Picket Fence Studios Paper Splatter Watercolor. This is the liquid white snowflake color. It has this beautiful white shimmery finish. I'll put a little bit on an acrylic block, spritz it with water, mix up the watercolor, then with a paintbrush I'll gently tap it over my background. And I did speed up the drying process using a heat tool. But just in case it's not completely dry, when I flip it over, I will place it on my small project grip mat. I'll put adhesive on the back using the Deluxe Adhesive Roller. And I'll also add some Artiste glue along the very outside. Since I did use my heat tool to dry this panel, the cardstock did warp just slightly. It's a very heavyweight cardstock, so it really didn't warp that much, but just to make sure it lays flat on my card panel, I like using some extra adhesive. I also placed a large acrylic block on top for some added weight while the glue dried. For a sentiment, I'll be adding the word thanks, and this is from scrapbook.com's Thank You set number 3 word dies. It has the word and also the outline, although I'll only be using the word. And I cut this out from some black pearlescent cardstock by Spellbinders. I'll put glue on the back and adhere the sentiment underneath the floral images, more on the left side of the card. I'll also be adding a stamp sentiment underneath the die cut sentiment. This is from scrapbook.com's Sunny Lane stamp set. This stamp set has the same thanks font in the same size, and it has several sentiments that you could add onto the word thanks. I'm stamping so very much directly underneath the word thanks. And I am using a mini MISTI to make sure I get a nice solid impression. With all the beautiful shimmer on the background, I decided this card didn't need any embellishments. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. Now here's another look at the 8 cards I made using scrapbook.com's Lovely Bunches stamp and coordinating die set. The floral images on this stamp set would look beautiful colored, but if you're like me and you don't color images, there are other ways to use beautiful stamp images. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links in the description box below. And all of the products I used in this video are available at scrapbook.com. If you enjoyed my video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.